Do you know who were the Hashasheen?
A brotherhood so secret that rulers shock with fear at their name.
Who was Hassan bin Sabbah, the master whose single command could decide the fate of king?
Their story is darker than legend and more terrifying than myth.
The assassins, who were they? Shadow or myth? A handful of men who brought empires to their knees. This is their story. But to understand the Hashasheen, we must start with the man who created them, Hassan bin Sabbah. Some called him a scholar. Others called him a saint. But history remembers him as the founder of the world's deadliest secret order. And his followers, they were known as the fidai, those who sacrifice. Men who walked into death without hesitation. Men who never broke under torture. Men who, if captured alive, would swallow poison before giving away. But how did such a terrifying force rise from the mountains of Persia? In the ancient city of Ray, a center of knowledge, trade, and political tension, in this city lived a young man with eyes like burning coals and a mind sharper than any blade. Hassan bin Sabbah. From childhood, Hassan was relentless. While others dreamed, he calculated. He devoured theology, philosophy, mathematics, each book shaping him, sharpening him. He was a man built not of muscle but of willpower. Imagine the young scholar crossing deserts for weeks, riding with caravans, surviving heat. Storms. Cairo welcomed him with golden halls, marble palaces, and scholars debating under lantern light. But inside the splendor, danger lurked. Cairo was a battlefield of minds. Hassan returned to Persia not as a student, but as a missionary with a plan. Quietly, he built a network of followers. He spoke to villagers at night, to travelers on the road, to scholars in hidden rooms. His words carried conviction, and wherever he went, hearts and minds turned toward him. But to build an unbreakable movement, he needed an unbreakable fortress, a jagged peak rising through the clouds, a narrow ridge barely wide enough for a horse to stand, a place nature itself had carved into a throne of stone. This was Alamut, the eagle's nest. At that time, Alamut was controlled by a Seljuk governor. But Hassan bin Sabbah was no warlord. He took it with strategy, with patience. He gained control of Alamut without a single drop of blood spilled. Under Hassan's command, Alamut transformed. Walls grew higher, towers solidified. Underground passages multiplied like veins beneath stone. And inside this mountain fortress, he trained the most loyal warriors the world had ever seen. The fidai. They learned silence before they learned weapons. They learned discipline before they learned killing. They climbed cliffs with bare hands, moved through cities disguised as merchants, monks, or servants. They carried daggers, not swords. They struck once cleanly, and vanished like smoke, most terrifying of all. They did not fear death. If captured, they swallowed poison hidden in their rings. And every ruler from Persia to Syria to Europe began to dread a single whisper. The assassins are coming. This is how the Hashasheen were born. From a scholar's mind, a mountain fortress, and a group of men whose loyalty knew no limits. Whispers spread of a secret garden hidden somewhere inside the fortress complex, a place said to be more beautiful than anything built by mortal hands. The walls of this garden were said to be impossibly high, blocking out the harsh mountain winds. Inside, trees bore fruit all year long. Streams of sparkling water wound through the greenery. Lanterns hung from branches, glowing like stars caught in the leaves. Cushions of velvet and embroidered silk lay scattered. Around marble pools, he kidnapped young girls from distant villages and caravans, then trained them to act as the heavenly maidens, described in scripture. They said these girls were forced to live inside the hidden paradise, isolated from the outside world, instructed to welcome young recruits as if they were angels. Chroniclers from hostile courts wrote that Hassan drugged selected recruits, placing them in deep sleep. When the young men awoke, they found themselves inside the paradise garden, surrounded by fragrances, music, food, and the smiles of the maidens. The experience was said to overwhelm their senses, convincing them they had tasted divine ecstasy. After hours, or perhaps days, they were drugged again and taken back to their barren stone cells. When they awoke beneath the cold, gray ceiling of the fortress, they were led to Hassan, who would calmly tell them that only through complete obedience could they return to the paradise they had witnessed. To a frightened king, belief is more dangerous than reality. And so the legend of the hash eaters, the Hashasheen, was born, not from evidence but from fear. Inside the fortress walls, the recruits trained with brutal discipline. Young boys and men who had come seeking purpose were transformed into instruments of precision. They learned to move silently along the cliffs, their feet gripping the cold stone like mountain goats. They practiced silent kills on wooden mannequins, striking vital points with daggers made of steel so sharp it could shave the skin without drawing blood. They memorized dialects, studied disguises, and learned patience so absolute they could stand motionless for hours. Outside observers saw none of this. They only saw the results. Rulers murdered in crowded bazaars, generals falling from their horses with daggers in their ribs, nobles collapsing at feasts with a blade lodged behind their shoulder blade. These were not chaotic attacks. They were mathematical acts of precision. The fidai, the devoted ones, never screamed slogans, never threatened, never hesitated. They struck once, cleanly, and waited calmly for execution, refusing to reveal anything. To enemies, this calmness was horrifying. Surely no normal man could embrace death so easily. Surely some sorcery must have been involved. Thus the legend of Hassan's paradise grew even stronger. When a fidai succeeded in a mission, was allowed to return to the paradise garden for a short time as reward. A cycle of obedience, ecstasy, and loyalty bind them to Hassan. The fidai begins his silent journey, moving through narrow streets with steady steps. His face is calm, but his eyes hold a fire that no one can see as he passes. Through the crowd, he blends with perfect ease. He has spent years studying the habits of the court he is about to enter, and every detail of the surroundings is already carved into his mind. He walks with a purpose that never shakes, knowing that the path before him is dangerous and thin. Yet he moves forward with the steady faith of a man who has already accepted death. Inside the foreign palace, the fidai serves as a humble attendant. His hands pour water, light lamps, and carry scrolls, yet his mind never rests. Every moment he watches and memorizes. He studies the guards and their rotations. He studies the ministers and their weaknesses. He listens to every whisper and records it in silence. No one suspects that the quiet servant walking among them holds a secret oath that will one day decide the fate of the court. Over weeks and months, the fidai rises in trust. He becomes the man called upon for small tasks and important messages. His gentle posture and measured speech make others lower their guard. With each passing day, he earns the confidence of officials who believe him harmless. His true strength lies in patience, and he uses it to weave himself deeper into the fabric of their world until at last he stands closer to power than any soldier or minister could imagine. When the time is right, he begins to expose the cracks in their world. He gathers secrets that powerful men hoped no one would ever know. He learns of hidden alliances, forbidden meetings, and silent betrayals. He uses these secrets like invisible weapons, shaping pressure around the officials until fear begins to creep into their hearts. No threats are spoken aloud, yet the rulers begin to feel watched, and the ministers begin to sense an unseen force pushing them toward decisions they do not fully understand. As fear spreads, the fidai becomes the unseen shadow around the throne. He moves without sound and speaks only when necessary. His knowledge now outweighs the swords of the royal guards, for he controls what they cannot defend. Against, he whispers truth to the right ears and silence to the others, until the balance of power starts to tilt. He stands close to the ruler, pretending loyalty while holding the power to end everything with one hidden strike. Finally, the moment comes that Fidai walks through the palace as if performing a familiar duty, yet inside him a storm rises. The target sits unaware, believing himself safe behind walls, guards, and wealth. The fidai approaches with steady steps, each one carrying the weight of his oath. He knows he will not leave this place alive, but that was never the purpose. With a calm breath, he accepts his fate and carries out his mission, knowing that his act will echo across kingdoms long after his final moment fades. At the height of the Seljuk Empire, dusk falls gently near Nahavand as the desert sky glows red. Inside his large ceremonial tent, the Grand Vizier, Nizam mulk, sits in calm dignity, reviewing petitions brought to him by travelers, scholars, and soldiers. His hands move steadily across scrolls as the warm lantern light casts soft shadows across silk drapes and patterned rugs. A lone figure approaches through the fading light, dressed as a humble Sufi wanderer. He wears a white turban, a simple robe, and sandals coated with desert dust. In his hands he carries a rolled petition scroll held gently like a sacred request. Yet behind his calm face lies an unshakable purpose. He is a fidai of the Nizari Ismailis trained. The guards stop him, but he bows softly. He whispers that he carries a request for the vizier whose reputation for listening to common people is known across the empire. Seeing nothing unusual in a wandering Sufi seeking justice, they allow him to pass. Inside the tent, stillness reigns. Nizam ul Mulk looks up from his writings and offers a gentle nod to the man before him. His face is calm, his voice steady as he asks what the visitor seeks. The Sufi steps closer, his posture humble yet deliberate. Lantern light flickers across his eyes as he lifts the scroll with slow, steady hands. The vizier expects a simple plea from a weary traveler, but destiny has chosen this moment to release its blade. With one swift movement, the Sufi unfurls the scroll and reveals a hidden dagger, concealed within the wooden handle. The blade flashes in the golden light and strikes with fierce precision. Nizam ul Mulk gasps, yet even in shock he understands the truth. Guards shout behind him, but they react too late. The fidai knows escape is impossible, yet he shows no fear. To him, the mission is sacred and completion is worth the price of his life. He is struck down moments later, but his task is already fulfilled. The vizier staggers, his strength fading as attendants rush to support him. The tent fills with frantic movement, yet the sound seems distant to him, like echoes carried by the wind. His vision dims, but his dignity remains. He whispers a final prayer, his voice steady despite the weight of death upon him. Outside the camp, torches burn against the twilight, yet a heavy silence settles over the empire. News spreads quickly that the pillar of Seljuk governance has fallen. Within weeks, the empire will plunge into uncertainty as rivals seize the chance to claim power and sultans struggle to hold the realm together. The death of Nizam ul Mulk becomes more than the fall of a statesman. It becomes the moment that shifts the balance of the empire. In the fading glow of dusk, the desert remembers the quiet step of a man, disguised as a Sufi who walked into a tent carrying a scroll, yet bearing a fate that would change history. The blade struck once, yet its impact echoed across generations as a reminder that even the greatest men stand only a breath away from the designs of destiny.